G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a great week. Now if you'd like to come and join the rage, come and join the Telegram and be involved in I guess more talks behind the scenes of all of this. But we have a fair bit to talk about today. Of course, we're going to have a look at the maps, not only in areas what are occupied, but also areas crossing back into Russia with these legions as well. And we've got some more geolocated footage we're going to look at there and a little bit of more new information about how this is being run. We're going to talk about as well a proposed maybe buffer zone, the air power in the south, what Senator Lindsey Graham has said, and a little bit of everything. And this will all tie into, I guess, Crimea, the bridge there, and the acceptance of something happening down in there. Now, where I want to start is I want to start at Senator Lindsey Graham, who has been in Kyiv with Zelensky, and some of the comments that have come out from himself regarding weapons, mobilization, and the future, I guess, of where this war is going to go. Because, as we know, a lot levers on this being US aid. If that US aid doesn't go in, not only is it going to have a huge effect on the front line, it's going to have a huge effect on morale and how the war will actually track from there. Yes, the EU can fund Ukraine for a peace, but as far as NATO, the overwhelming majority of NATO is US, same as into Ukraine funding too. So much is on this, and it is very, very important for the continuation of this war, if that is what the US is choosing to do. So Lindsey Graham, like I said, has been in Kyiv. Now, he's called on Ukrainian lawmakers to quickly pass a mobilization bill, sharply questioning the exemption for men under 27 from the fight. Now, this is something that we know is for conscription mobilization in Ukraine, you have to be above 27, although you can't leave the country from 18 to 60. So proposing the country's draft age lowering to then 25. Although citizens can voluntarily join the military starting at 18, and men between 18 and 60 are banned from leaving the country. Now, here's said, I would hope that those eligible to serve in the Ukrainian military would join. I can't believe it's at 27. You're in a fight for your life, so you should be serving, not at 25 or 27. We need more people in the line. Now, firstly, if I was my age now sitting in Ukraine, I'd be like, who the fuck are you to tell me to volunteer or to be conscripted coming from the outside in, especially when Lindsey Graham voted against one of the aid bills to Ukraine as well. But this is something I want to speak on here before we move forward. In the beginning of the war, Ukraine couldn't physically get enough weapons or have enough recruitment officers to actually recruit or even arm the amount of people that were volunteering to fight back the Russians. And since then, being now well over 2 years, we've seen peaks and troughs of people volunteering, and this peaks and troughs, they align right with the morale on the front line, which of course then aligns with the frontline success and survivability of soldiers. So those factors have a huge effect on further recruitment. Now, for the last 3 months, we've heard constantly about a shell shortage in Ukraine. But more importantly, we're hearing more and more about the lack of manpower on the front line, something that is far more difficult to overcome than just more shells going into the country. Now, the lack of success on the front line and high casualties is the direct contributing factor to this. Since the Kharkiv and Kherson offensives in late 2022, which aligned with the Russian military being on the back foot and a complete disorganization on the line, there's been limited victories on the ground. We have the counteroffensive that now everyone has just accepted as a failure, and we have had Russian victories as Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and holding back also that counteroffensive. That these have really had a huge impact on the morale, therefore a huge impact on the recruitment. Now, forget Navy ships and planes being taken down. Yes, these are huge strategic targets that have a huge effect on Russia when these are taken down. But this isn't the reality for a soldier who's volunteering to sit in a trench. They're not going to be the ones in a fighter jet or, putting the drone boat in the side of the Navy ship. That they're going to be a soldier on the front line. And you can see very quickly how this can spiral. In good times, it spirals up very quickly as far as you're getting better morale, you're getting around, more people are volunteering. But in bad times, you have the opposite, that when you desperately need people, when things aren't going well, then you don't have the people volunteering to do it. Bad news affecting morale is malignant. And PR stunts, political victories, they won't help alleviate this. And propaganda to sign up is not as successful it has been in wars gone past, because we've got the internet. You've got interactive maps. You've got GoPros. You've got drones. You've got all this showing what the realities of the front line actually are. And young men either recruiting themselves, volunteering, or being conscripted, they're not dumb. They see what the reality actually is. And the reality is then you have less people volunteering. You're going to have then a mobilization. And I put a lot of doubt on the effectiveness of mobilized soldiers. Yes, you'll get the amount of soldiers, but the willingness to fight, the training is still questionable as well. And then this can then just have this, spiral into what the effect we're seeing at the moment, where you have limited shells that is causing a problem on the front line. Problems on the front line, people aren't going to go into an office and volunteer when they've got all of these issues. So these things need to be overcome for any chance of success on the front lines as well. Now, we'll continue on what Lindsey Graham has said. He's also urged Ukrainians not to base their decisions to join the military on whether the US continues to support them. No matter what we do, you should be fighting. No matter what we do, you're fighting for you. So saying that no matter if we give the money or we don't, you shouldn't base your decision on that. Well, I'm sorry, these people aren't dumb, mate. If they know that this money, the US is not backing this and we're going to have a huge shell shortage, we're going to have a huge ISR shortages, I'm not going to go to the front line and bloody die if I don't even have supply. So, yeah, people should base their actual decisions on the reality of what is going on. And I think if the US does sign this, we'll see then that peak of people joining as well. Now, continuing. I was very direct with President Zelensky. You can expect me to always be in your corner, but it is not unfair for me to ask you and other allies, pay us back down the road if you can. I think the loan idea is going to be pretty popular, not just among Republicans, but also among Democrats. So instead of this money just being given as aid and it's there and gone, that it's given as a loan that Ukraine at some point will have to pay back. Now, of course, this comes with its own issues as well for Ukraine, who has a demographic crisis. Russia has a huge demographic crisis as well, but also with the limited economic stability of Ukraine now that the south is almost all occupied. Now, before we go on to further in the article, he has put this then on his X, Twitter, whatever the bloody hell it is. During my meeting with President Zelensky, I informed him that given the crisis at the US southern border and our overwhelming debt, President Trump's idea of turning aid from the US into a no-interest waivable loan is the most likely path forward. Would this get that money across the line? This is not only true for aid for Ukraine, but other countries across the board. I reiterate that the House's Ukraine aid legislation must include some American border security provisions, and talking about the F-16 training and designating Russia as a terrorist state. Now, once Ukraine gets back on its feet, they will be an economic powerhouse because of their access to mass deposits of critical minerals, oil, and gas. And we have seen that companies like BlackRock, Vanguard have been buying large areas of land in Ukraine, of course, wanting to get a piece of this. But after war, look at the examples of countries that have come out of war. Look at Japan, look at Germany, can become an economic powerhouse. It seems like when you have a war, you go one of two ways. Either everything falls apart after it, or everything goes brilliantly and you have a huge surge of young children too, which Ukraine desperately need as well. But don't be fooled that this may happen on the other side of the borders as well. As we do know, as far as Russia, they have the demographic crisis, but also huge deposits of minerals, oil, and gas. This is how they're funding the war. Now, Lindsey Graham then goes on about this, that for the slow deliveries of US long-range missiles known as the ATACMS should have been here yesterday. He hoped Ukraine will soon get ATACMS so you can knock the dam bridge down linking Crimea to Russia. Now, of course, what bridge are we talking about? What do you mean, what bridge are we talking about? Of course, this is Ukraine. This is the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22. The purple since 2014. The 10-year anniversary of that was only yesterday. Of course, we're talking about across the Kerch Strait, the bridge in here that links both rail and road to Crimea. That is the primary way to get arms, to get supplies into the south where Russia is fighting, and into Sevastopol, Melitopol, areas like this. Now, to celebrate that 10 years, Putin has had a concert. Now, he has said some very, very interesting bits in this. Now, again, with things like this, it's a perfect one with the Trump bloodbath situation. Go and find the transcript of what was actually said. It will make you smarter. It will make you more informed for it. Now, anything that Putin says is on the Kremlin website. You can find it there. Now, exactly 10 years ago, taking the same stage on Red Square, I recalled Crimea is often called the unsinkable aircraft carrier. This is what prompted me to say that Crimea had returned its home harbour. Now, this is what we do know. The unsinkable aircraft carrier, if you want to call it, is, of course, you've got the Navy in here, but you can also have then Air Force bases in here that do work as a leapfrog out into the Black Sea and also control down into South Eastern Europe as well. So, incredibly strategically important area, Crimea. Now, Crimea is not only strategically vital territory, not only part of our history, our traditions as Russia's pride. Crimea is primarily its people. So it goes on about how he sees Crimea as theirs, looking after it, and of course how vital it is strategically, probably downplayed in this for Russia's control into the Black Sea and Sea of Azov as its only warm water port. But this last bit is something we've spoken about before, and I think is very interesting. Now we're making progress and moving forward together side by side. Just this morning, I received a report from the railway from Rostov to Donetsk, Mariupol, Berdyansk has been restored. Now, we've spoken at length about this specific railway before. Now, let's look at some of the areas he talks of. Rostov, Mariupol, and then to Berdyansk, which sits down in here. And where this is going is, of course, then straight into Sevastopol, like he says here. We will continue this work. Soon, trains will go straight to Sevastopol. This would be yet another alternate route instead of the Crimean bridge. Now, link this with then what Senator Graham has said about taking that damn bridge down. Now, the problem for Russia in here geographically right now is to support a troop over bloody here somewhere. Let's draw him here. Oh, his head is large. You have to get stuff then through the Kerch Bridge into, say, Sevastopol or up into the south region. Now, what Ukraine's counteroffensive was attempting to do was get down, we see the dip in here where they had their main push, somewhere like Tokmak or Melitopol here to then cut off the supply here, take out then the Kerch Bridge, and eventually these guys over in this area would be struggling on logistics and make it much, much harder. What we have seen before for photos over the last, say, 12 months is then a new railway that is going from Rostov across here. So Rostov, Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, and then down into Sevastopol here, and then would use other railway systems, we're guessing, out into Kherson somewhere, whether it links here or down into here. Now, some of this is out of range of a lot of the weapon systems that Ukraine uses. Not all of them, but still a lot of them. This is why things like the ATACMS, having the extended range, say 300 kilometers, would be very important for this. Now, Rostov as well is a very, very important area. In Rostov here, this is where the inland sea network comes for Russia, so a lot of ships can move both through the Black Sea, Sea of Azov up into here, but also can use this to move all around the country. So going to make a second one here, and I think Putin saying here, the alternative, what does he say, instead of the Crimean Bridge, knows that that is going to be targeted definitely at some point. This is what we saw then the German officers speaking about as well. Now, speaking about, we'll go to the maps in 1 second, I promise, but we need to speak about then the buffer zone that has been spoken about in Ukraine as well. Now, where do I see this war ending? Well, unless there's some massive aid, no, I'm not talking $60 billion, I'm talking $600 billion into Ukraine, or that Russia invents some bloody super Skynet shit. I just don't see that this war's going to move that much without some huge influx from either the east or from the west. I just don't see what weapon is coming in that's going to change this. It's not going to be F-16s in their limited numbers and the capabilities of F-16s. That is not going to just completely roll the front line. Yes, other areas will be affected dramatically, but as far as the whole front line, it's just not going to happen with one system like this. And the amount of time, every single day this war adds, every day that this war has extra, adds multiple days on the end somewhere, wherever the end is, because you're digging in defensive lines far faster than ground is being taken. It's an attritional war. Both Ukraine and Russia have a hell of a lot of resources to attrit before things all then fall apart. Where I've said before is, will there be some sort of buffer zone depending where it is, and the front lines sit there, and it will be like a demilitarized area with then front lines that are dug in that are basically impassable. It'd be hard to make the an argument against that the massive build-ups of defensive works that Russia has made, that Ukraine is making, are passable with the amount of manpower and weapons currently in either Ukraine or Russia's hand for a huge push through. But I could be incorrect. So we have had some talk about buffer zones. So this is Mikhailo Podolyak we've spoken about. Again, he is a senior Ukrainian official and a spokesman to President Zelensky. And this is saying back on what Putin has said about buffer zones as well as a Kremlin spokesman. So saying this is a direct manifest statement that the war will only escalate, saying it's going to get worse. All this direct evidence the Russian Federation is not ready to live in a modern social and political relations, taking into account the absolute sovereign rights of other countries. So why should we have a buffer zone in our country when you have been invaded? Now, let's look at what has been said here. In a call with reporters, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said, against the backdrop of Ukrainian drone attacks and shelling of our country, public facilities and residential buildings, measures must be taken to secure these territories. They can only be secured by creating some kind of buffer zone so that any means that the enemy uses to strike us are out of range. Now, after winning the election, Putin has said this: I do not exclude that, bearing in mind tragic events taking place today, that we will be forced at some point, when we deem it appropriate, to create a certain sanitary zone in territories today under the Kiev regime. So, there's some little bits we can take out of this. One, well, he's not saying that then Kiev is going to be completely taken out, that Ukraine is going to fall all under Russia, but that there has to be some sanitary zone, buffer zone, whatever you want to call it, out of striking range. So would it be something, like this? We don't know exactly how this would look. We have no idea, but what we do know is defensive works are being built all over the country. Now, let's look at the maps. Now, to go on with this term of building up more defensive works, we have this from Ausint Defender. Ukrainian Armed Forces over the last few months, with the assistance of volunteers and Regional Cadet Corps, have significantly expanded their defensive lines near the city of Odessa and between Odessa and Mykolaiv regions due to fears presented by Western intel agencies that Russia may once again launch a large-scale offensive, with the goal being to capture the Black Sea coastline. And photos of this, and we've seen, this is not the first time we've seen this, we've seen this a heap, with Ukraine right now is focusing heavily on building up those defensive works. But where this is sitting is between Odessa, Mykolaiv. Now, this is where the Russians have got to before and failed to keep their logistics supply up to then get then the coastline down here. If this coastline was able to be controlled by Russia, like the coastline we see down between Mariupol and Kherson, this would spell huge issues for Ukraine, especially economic, because we know these other countries in NATO, they do not like Ukrainian grain going out and agricultural products going out through their borders by road, that Ukraine still need to get it out by sea. That would cause a huge issue very quickly. And this is what we've spoken about with Transnistria. Of course, this leftover of the Soviet Union, Russian-occupied bit of area here. Could there be a close-off here? Would it be easier than actually taking Odessa? Odessa would be very difficult. We've spoken at length about this, but it is interesting to see the build-up of defensive works. You're not going to take resources, time and effort to build defensive works if there's not a real risk, just like we're seeing up in Kharkiv or then behind Avdiivka. Now, let's have a look over the maps and have a look at some of these areas. Now, first we need to come down into is, of course, Avdiivka onto the Ukrainian Ministry of Defence's map here. Now, we have a look to the 18th yesterday, then we look up to today, and that Russia has, I'll say now, 100% of control over Orlivka in here. That has taken a number of weeks to get. Now, There's no other changes seen in here, but there is reports, although take these with a very large grain of salt, that troops from Badachi are then moving back into Semenivka here. Now, what I do imagine we'll see is the first line of defense does sit down through here. Let's just say it's right there. It's very close to this. And the second line of defense follows something along like this down, of course, these waterways here and here. I do think that Ukrainian soldiers will continue to supply other troops in this area to try and hold back the Russians for as long as possible, and then make a tactical withdrawal back to the second line of defense when the actual line of defense is ready. What you don't want is to fall back here, this over here isn't ready, and then you have a steamrolling through lines of defense, similar to what we saw initially in Avdiivka, where you lose 20 kilometers in a few days. So we have seen that change here, but Deep State have another Deep State, what we're talking about, Syriac, have another update for us. Now, if there's ever a time to go and support Syriac, it is now. He's copping a hell of a lot of shit for just doing his work, which I believe he does very well, which I'll show you in a second, where he was at least 72, 96 hours in front of this map here. Now, let's have a look here. Now, what we need to do is actually firstly line this up. This is Avdiivka. This is Keramik here. Now, this is Keramik here. Now, Avdiivka will just be off this map down. So we're just talking in this area here. See the train line comes down and the train line splits off. So just in this area, you can see where these paddocks line up in here too. Now, situation north of Avdiivka. During the last 48 hours, Ukrainian army increased the attacks along the railway and south of Novokalnovi and managed to recapture some positions in this axis. There is still a part of Orlivka in grey zone. The proximity to the Duma River prevents Russian army from completely securing the locality. Meanwhile, fighting in Tonenki continues in the northern part of the village, where Ukrainian troops are holding their positions. So he's saying that there's still a part in Orlivka that is in grey zone. Now, again, we see how these maps look. Maybe they're talking this part in here, but that because of the Duna River to cross over is difficult. That is where the first line of defense is sitting, but it does show that Ukrainians did manage to capture a piece of territory up in this region here, not being shown on the MOD map. Now, moving down to the south, we just see nothing. We see nothing on the Deep State map up into the northeast, but we do have another update from the Syriac maps as well in Tabayevka. So minimize this. This is Tabayevka in here. This, of course, is the roadway running through here. That Russian army made minimal advances northeast to Tabayevka towards the main Ukrainian trench in this direction. The situation around the village is complicated for Russian forces as Ukrainian army still control over the western hills. Up in the north, the ground definitely benefits Ukraine more. Currently, both in Tabayevka and around Sinkivka, that Ukraine can use the hills advantage to hit with artillery, but saying there was just a small advancement up here. Now, 96 hours ago, 72 hours ago, we had multiple updates of Syriac talking then about that Russia had advances just to the west of Robotny here, to the east of Verbove, of course, trying to recapture then these fortifications here. Now, what we have seen is this map is starting to catch up. So from the 7th to 18th, we saw this, of course, at least getting a part of that trench system. And then today we see this. Remembering this map has gone from independent to under the control of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. So as well, I'm guessing anything will be lagging behind. And yeah, I think it's a real pity that that has then occurred. Now, I'll continue on with the maps, but we'll talk about then these movements into... actually, no, we need to stay down here. Sorry, let's not do this. We will talk about that. But down in the south in Robotny here, now, there is said to be a lot more air power getting in control down here. Now, Resident UA then put this up, so take it with a grain of salt. But our sources in the General Staff said that Syrskyi, of course, who replaced Zhelezny, agreed with the office of the president on the formation of new mobile air defense groups for these purposes. Some of the Patriot launchers will be removed from the southern direction and Kyiv. So this is the southern direction and Kyiv. The situation at the front is critical due to constant enemy bombing. So as we know, Patriot launchers, air defense, you can never have enough of it, that you're going to have to sacrifice an area somewhere. And this is what we saw, say, in Avdiivka. This is what we're seeing down in Odessa, where we're seeing more hits too. Now, in line with this, we then have multiple stories coming out like this, that Ukrainian forces say Russians continue to use tactical aircraft near Robotny. So this would line up with taking them from the south. Russia's going to take advantage of that with its aircraft. And then from the Southern Command has then released this today. In the operational zone of the Southern Defense Forces, a daily counter-battery fighting continues. The enemy does not abandon his intention to knock out our units from occupied positions. He's made multiple assaults. Our fighters carry out comprehensive measures. The occupiers do not stop aerial reconnaissance, press with artillery fire, and use of large number of strike drones, various types. Between here, releasing 6 guided aerial bombs, so from the tactical aircraft spoken about, down in these areas in the Zap Oblast, and 8 unguided aerial missiles. So those FABs we presume are coming down in Zap, Robo, Makariivka areas. So that it sort of lines up. This is what you need to do with just the amount of propaganda, misinformation that's going on. You see something like this that you can't confirm, but then you start seeing official channels like there's been an increase or a non-stop of that with those tactical aircraft not being hit. We're not seeing them hit like they apparently were. That, okay, maybe something is happening with the movement of Patriots somewhere and the movement of Russian aircraft as well. Now, let's have a look then at the cross-border operations that we have been seeing. Now, of course, these are the 4 incursions that we have in the Kursk Oblast and, of course, in Belgorod between, of course, Sumy and Kharkiv. Now, these are limited, and the amount of information coming out that is a bit off, there's a lot of that too, but we have some geolocated stuff for you to look at. Now, one thing I just want to show you here, this is, of course, down in Belgorod. Now, this is the Kukovsky area. So we're talking right here. So just to the west of Gravoroň here, of course, out from Belgorod. Now, this is the newer one that we saw pop out just the other day. Now, War Mapper says this shows that in Belgorod, they entered the settlement just south of the main Russian defensive line. This is something that I think a lot of people are forgetting about. From here just into Moscow, into Belgrade, it's not just open territory. There is major build-up Russian defensive lines behind where these incursions are, and they have yet to reach those fortifications. So let's have a look here. These are all the Russian fortifications that are all geolocated. You can click on them and look through them, and we can have a look at areas of which where these, incursion has then happened. So we have the Sumy Oblast out here. Then we have Thankyou here. So let's have a look at Thankyou. That we have a push in just into Thankyou, but of course the defensive work is far beyond there. Now we come down into Kharkiv where they have pushed a little bit further. We have Kozinka. Let's just zoom out. Come down. Kozinka near Gravoroň, Glotovo. Now this is the one where they're mostly right near then the main defensive line here. Near Gravoroň, Kozinka, but it's really, it's hard to say exactly where it's sitting, but if we have a look where this road is, where this is, maybe they're up to it in that region. Then we have a look across at Gorkovsky, that they're not yet at that defensive line, and as well, if we can then further across into Novaya here, that will come in Novaya, so maybe up to that as well. It depends which map you're believing, but we need to remember that there is huge defensive works build up here as well, that with the amount of forces that have actually crossed, it is going to be limited as well to then get the civilians behind those lines into safety that are in these areas too. But we do have a little bit of footage showing some bits and pieces here. So first off, we need to watch this video here. We can't show the full thing, but this is the Russian Legion targeting Russian infantry with FPV drones here, and I will stop it there. It'll be on the Telegram if you'd like to watch it, but this is then geolocated to here. So Glotovo, that it's just across. So we do know that there are Russian infantry present in Kozinka just here. We'll look back on then this map. Let's go to Kozinka here, and that there is infantry confirmed just about here somewhere. So again, we rely on actual geolocations of what is happening. This was geolocated off the part of the video here that has been struck, and these buildings that line up here, if you'd like to double check, then the geo location. Now we have this one here. Now this is Ukrainian GUR said to be in fire support for the Russian Legion that has crossed. So they are firing 50 cal artillery mortars from Ukrainian land into then Russian land as well. And that is done by GUR. The people who actually cross is said to just be Ukrainian backed. So we have this. Now this is geolocated to Popivka here, firing then from Ukraine into Russia. Now, let's just have a watch of this footage as there is something else interesting in this. So we see burning buildings, so there's definitely been counter battery and fire coming in. And then this funny looking vehicle here. Now what this is this is a BAT-2 engineering vehicle. Now this is a Ukrainian one. That said, it's in Ukrainian hands currently. This, I believe 3 of these by Russia have actually been captured by Ukraine and have been being used by the Ukrainian forces as well. But the definitely one within Ukrainian land down here somewhere in Popivka has been taken out. Now, of course, there's no Russian presence in Popivka, so it was in use by the Ukrainian forces clearing whatever into or back into Russia. But don't underestimate how important engineering vehicles are like this, whether it's the Soviet ones like this, the Russian ones, the ones sitting on Abrams hulls, on Leopard's hulls, or whatever hulls. Engineering vehicles like this are incredibly, incredibly important for an offensive to push through defensive lines, to push through mines. They're big and expensive and slow. So a loss like this is a major loss. And then we see then fire out across then the border. I'm guessing this is one of the guard towers of the border, and fire support out across there. So the fighting in these areas, if you're using still small arms, as far as 50 cal considered still, small arms fire, it's not a bloody tank, is still very close in these areas. As far as people will claim that they've pushed out into bloody here somewhere, no. You've got the defensive line and you've got fire support very close as well. Now, the last bit of footage I want to show you, this could be old, I'm not sure, but this is a Ukrainian patrol boat actually getting hit with a loitering Lancet drone as well. And the Lancets I've spoken about have actually been very impressive for cost to hit rate seems to be very good. But will this cause a complete sinking of the boat? Probably not. These still have a very small warhead, so it's probably got some minimal damage, but not massive. Now, the very last thing I want to speak about is the election in Russia. Now, I should have maybe spoken about this earlier because it would make people comment and that'll help boost the algorithm for me. But let's not make out like Navalny was ever a serious contender to take down Putin in like a democratic election. If it was actually democratic, fair election, the actual support he had seems limited. And if you actually see the turnout to rallies for him, it's large, but it's not that large. It's not going to swing 130 million people's bloody vote. But what I was thinking about last night was, what if Prigozhin wasn't killed? Prigozhin would have been, I guess, the real contender in that election. And in my eyes, would have actually been the more evil of the two, not the lesser of two evils, because we don't know, at least with Putin, he's been in power for a number of years and has never launched a bloody nuke somewhere where it's the devil or whatever the saying is. But I've just thought about that was the contender, probably not Navalny. Anyway, legends, I hope that you have a great day. Sorry this one goes so long. Look after yourself. If you'd like to support me, there's links below, but never feel obliged. Thank you. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.